You know, there is a part of me that actually does worry from time to time, especially before I actually clean up the room, that one day an earthquake is just gonna bring this all down on top of me and kill me. But that day is not today, because I'm making another video where we're gonna be talking about some of the events that I went to this time in winter of 2024. A little late, I know, since we're already in the middle of spring, but some other videos came up along the way, so these ones I kind of want to like do a retrospective on some of the stuff I went to. Although I guess for winter it is a little more difficult to make a long video, in the sense that most of the stuff I went to that probably is a little longer tend to end up being their own videos already. Things such as Comiket, the Blue Archive event as well. Those kind of were some of the bigger things that actually took up an entire weekend that I went to, but those are already their own thing that you can go check out if you want. So for this video, we're going to be talking about some of the other stuff, the other doujin events, as well as some of the other smaller pop-up stores that I went to during the period. Although with the pop-up stores, one thing that always has felt a little difficult is that with many of them, because of the fact that the scale is quite small, because they're meant to be a very small thing, it's very difficult for me to talk too much about them, which is why typically I just leave it as this short thing where I just put a picture or two onto YouTube instead. But I figured we could go through some of them, since there was some that were interesting to me as well. First off, like, there was one for Onimai in Vox Akihabara, which is a anime goods store that sells basically everything from figures to character goods as well, somewhere nearby to the Animate, but along the main road as well. So the good thing with this pop-up store, I guess, was the fact that unlike the Onoden as well as the typical Atre ones that I do take pictures of that go up onto YouTube as well as Twitter, this one, because of the fact that it takes place on a dedicated event space for this pop-up store instead, it actually gives them a lot more leeway with the decorations, which is why for this one you kind of do see them setting up a full wallpaper that stretches the entire store. They had the TV there as well, which for most of the other ones they do have the TV as well as the display case for the goods, but in a sense, because of the much bigger space that they had, they did end up being able to display things in a way that looked a lot cooler and give the space a lot more fullness to it, in a way, I guess, where you can actually sit within the area itself and just enjoy the vibes of the TSF friend and their friends of friends. Though even for that one, it was still fairly simple, but just right beside it, like literally within the same space as well, they actually had one for Shimeji Simulation, as well as the other works that Tsukumizu had made in the past, including Shoujo Shumatsuryoko, Girl's Last Tour, if I'm not mistaken with the name. So it was basically an area dedicated to all of the different series that they had made and all the goods that they're trying to sell, as well as some pretty cool displays for it. Truth be told, I really have enjoyed their art style quite a fair bit, so actually being able to see them actually get a full space for the series is actually kind of nice, especially since it feels like for Shimeji Simulation it didn't really get as much popularity. I know like Girl's Last Tour gets a fair level of like memory outside of Japan as well, so it does seem like people know it to some extent, but I don't really hear people talking about the other one as well. So it was really cool to see that even in spite of that, it did have enough popularity to be able to have its own pop-up store together with all of the other stuff that they had made over the years. And in a way, it kind of served as a pretty interesting reminder of all of the different works that they had made. And as a result, I really did enjoy just walking through and looking at everything that was on sale there. But yeah, I guess the theme that I have for this specific part is just that I find it interesting how there are quite a few of these very specifically creator-centric IPs or series that were basically created first by someone who just really had an interest in the thing but wasn't really already in the space itself, wherein the creator of the Girl's Last Tour, as well as for Onimai, both of them basically started out creating doujins. I mean, Onimai itself is a doujin series, which was basically just able to get enough popularity that both of these eventually got animated. So for me, it was actually kind of cool to see that even for all of the people who initially started out as like doujin creators, in the sense they all eventually managed to find this level of success in this day and age, even though people are talking about how like a lot of things are getting a lot more corporate and big scale, if anything. Especially with Onimai, like it kind of surprises me like how many different runs of goods as well as pop-up stores it has had, because aside from the one that happened this time around, I think there were also 2 or 3 others that I went to in the past, although with those they were a lot smaller scale, in places like Onoden for example, but it was really just you had a few standees out with the goods there rather than an entire space of its own like this. So it's just kind of cool to see it slowly ramp up to this point, and just the fact that there has been so much stuff going on both in terms of this as well as in terms of stuff like collab cafes as well, for an IP that initially started out as just some guy's hobby project. Speaking of that though, there was another one in the same vein that I went to within December. So all all of this three basically happened within the span of maybe 3 or 4 days. With these two, I think I went to them on the 28th of December. And then during the Comiket period itself, it would seem that it has become kind of a tradition for the series, if anything, where for the series with our favorite girl who really needs to touch grass over here. Wait a minute. You might want to stay away from him, he's a little dangerous. Right, for our little Ojou-sama over here, it would seem that they had another pop-up store during the end of year, which once again was run in conjunction with the booth in Comiket, where they basically had like a little stamp rally where you could get the stamps from the collab pop-up store as well as from the Comiket booth itself, and both would basically give you a full like stamp set instead. Anyway, for this one it was a lot smaller because it was in the, I believe it was called Eternal Toys, which is located in the back alleys in one of the stores in Akihabara itself. So basically in the back alleys of Akihabara there are like multiple Surugayas, where Surugaya is like a second-hand store, one of which is the second-hand retro game store, which is located in a random building in the back alley. And on the 5th floor of the building there is actually an anime goods store that is fairly small, and basically every single year for I think maybe the last 2 years as well, they have been having a pop-up store there, which basically has been running in conjunction with the Comiket booth. So pretty cool to see that running for a 3rd year straight. It still kind of amazes me that this series, which also started out as a doujin series, which I believe only started maybe 3 or 4 years back, where I first saw it in Comitia, if anything, it actually felt kind of interesting to see it grow in that sense from that size all the way to what it is today. I feel like with stuff like Onimai as well as with the Girls Last Tour, I actually ended up getting into the series a lot later. With Girls Last Tour was when it was already animated. With Onimai, I think it was about a year prior to it getting animation, but I think by then it already had gotten its manga publication volumes out, so it was already decently popular. And it was kind of cool to see with this one all of the growth and development over time, from just being a small thing on Twitter all the way to, I mean, it doesn't have an anime yet, but it has gotten 2 tankobon manga publications, it has an ASMR and a whole bunch of other things, and I find that to be really cool. As for the pop-up store itself, it didn't change all too much. I mean, the space in the store itself kind of changed. I was kind of stunned at first just because of the fact that when I went into the store, it felt like the entirety of the store had completely changed its design from when I went there the year before. So suffice to say, it was plenty confusing trying to get around it in spite of how small it was, but it was kind of cool seeing just the little board. I think it was hand-drawn by the creator himself, as well as all of the other goods that were from the previous years also on display. This time around, they didn't have the blueberry juice, which they had the last time around. Instead, they had a bottle of apple juice instead. Frankly, I don't know why they choose to go with like fruit themed juices every single time. This one, I think it came from I think it was stated back here somewhere. Yeah, the apples themselves come from Nagano Prefecture. I think I mentioned before, the apples from the prefecture themselves, they're actually pretty good, to be honest. So I'm guessing they did something in collaboration to sell the apple juice. It feels a little fancy, kind of like, you know, especially since it's sold at the end of the year, just before the end of the year, you can just sip your apple juice instead of your alcohol and enjoy the New Year's passing as you realize your eventual demise from growing old. But yeah, aside from that, they also had the little like, I guess they do this for plenty of other series as well, where you have something that's just like a little frame image and all. This one actually came with a serialization as well, and I thought it would be really cool to get it to just support the series. So it's not all that unique, I feel like. Like usually when I see the frame just like standard image thing, it feels a little lame, to be honest, but just the fact that it's serialized and helps to support the creator, since they're still doing this mostly as a doujin thing, is something I kind of enjoy, so I just got it in the end. Though on the topic of a much larger scale pop-up store, there was also one for the Lyrical Nanoha series that happened in Shinjuku's Marui Annex. This one actually, it's not the first time that they did one of this size. I think I talked about one maybe 2 years ago that was about that scale, but there wasn't really one like that last year, if I'm not mistaken. And this year, I think that because of the fact they wanted it to run in conjunction with the announcement for the anime, it was actually kind of large scale, and the number of like exhibits that were within the booth also increased a lot, even compared to the one from 2 years ago, where with that one you kind of had a small display area and a short like video that would play that you will go into and just sit down and watch the video before going into the display, then the shop area. With this one, they actually had a full-on display area, and the whole thing was themed as a like fashion show sort of thing as well. For each of these pop-up stores, usually they actually do, like I guess with all pop-up stores, they do tend to theme it after something. It's just kind of interesting with the Nanoha ones in the sense that for the large scale pop-up stores that they do, they tend to have like a little whole mini plot line going along with it. So you went through multiple display areas, each one with like the characters having a dialogue playing overhead. Before you enter the area, there's a little TV section where they will play a short cutscene of them talking before it goes into the next one. And this rotated around 5 or 6 times, and I found it to be pretty cool, the amount of effort that they were actually putting into the pop-up store itself, since frankly it really is the case that with most pop-up stores, it's just like you have place, you have decoration, you have goods, or some you don't even really have that much in terms of decoration because it's in a mall and you don't really have as much ability to decorate it. So the fact that they were trying to develop this entire like experience zones for a little plot line they're trying to develop for the pop-up store itself was something that I always found to be pretty cool that the series does. And I did find the outfits and all to be really cool as well. So as a result, there's a Nanoha up there now as well. Truth be told, I'm usually not one for buying acrylic stands, but with this one it was just very interesting the way that it was colored as well. I don't know how obvious it is from the video itself, but as you can see, it actually does have a very unique hue to it. I guess it's maybe a bit more obvious when I'm holding it in my hand, but unlike your standard acrylic stands where it's just character image on acrylic, with this one they actually did a full color for the layer as well, and they did it make it out of a reflective material that actually causes it to reflect light in a pretty interesting way as well, which basically triggers my card game player brain because it goes like, ooh, shiny. But yeah, what also was pretty cool about it was that they also did announce the new Nanoha manga that was coming out. Surprisingly not the anime though, because they announced that they were making a new manga and they were showing like certain frames, certain cuts from it that were actually voiced by the voice actresses, and they all sounded really cool, and I was like, ooh, they're actually gonna release, they finally, after like, I think it was like in Lyrical Live maybe 2020 or 2019, after almost 5 years, when they said they were gonna announce something and nothing came, they actually finally announced the thing. So it took a while, it really took you a while there. I don't know if the pandemic was alone enough to cause such a massive delay, to be honest. But yeah, it was just kind of funny that they were showing and displaying all of the stuffs for the pop-up store, and then at the very end of the pop-up store, they just had announcement, new manga series coming soon. And then only about a month later did they announce the anime, so there was no news on the anime itself during the pop-up store itself, which was a little unfortunate. The funny thing is that the pop-up store is actually still ongoing now, even though it started in February and we're already, in April, because it ran in Tokyo first and I think it just finished its run in Osaka. So I'm not sure if it did Tokyo, Nagoya, Osaka, or Tokyo, Osaka, Nagoya, but either way, it ran for quite a very long period of time, so it was actually kind of surprising. Oh, when I say today, I mean today, the 7th of April, when I'm recording this, not when you guys see this, which is probably in May. But yeah, aside from all of the very interesting displays that were put up to try and give off more of that whole like fashion show experience that they were giving, they also had the parka that they were selling for the pop-up store itself, the clothing itself, except that it was signed by each of the individual seiyus. Unfortunately, that one wasn't actually on sale. You could only get the parka itself, which actually looked kind of lame, to be honest, because like the front was just completely plain and you just had a small image on the back, and that was about it. It really didn't feel very inspired. Frankly, it feels like even if it was just a copy of the seiyu signs, if they had just sold that instead, they could have probably earned a lot more. But then again, hey, who's to know? I'm not the merchandising expert here. I feel like just having just a printed sign on it would have already been enough to trigger my brain a lot more than what they had. So maybe I might be onto something. Maybe that might be a future profession I can get into as well. And aside from that, there was also all of the Blue Archive post-anniversary stuff. I know that like last few years, I usually release these as a separate video. Like in the second anniversary, it was all merged together with the 1 month Akihabara campaign. That was pretty cool and a lot of fun. They didn't do that again, unfortunately, but even in the year after the 3rd anniversary, they actually did do quite a fair bit of stuff there as well. So they had the collab cafes, they still had a bunch of pop-up stores all going on, so it was actually pretty cool, and I decided to make it on this own video. But it seems like with each passing year, they have been putting a lot more effort into the fest itself and a lot less into the stuff that happens after it, because as I mentioned before, the second fest was quite a small thing that happened within Akihabara itself. Then it went to Chiba, and then it was still at Chiba the next year, and with both the scale scale felt a lot bigger, and with the third one it felt a lot better organized in terms of the logistics as well. So it feels like a lot of the effort went into holding that on a much greater scale, and they steadily cut back on what they have in the post-anniversary period, probably because they expect us all to be broke after paying the exorbitant tickets to enter the thing. But that said, they still did have two different pop-up stores during the period. The standard one at Atre, this time around it was with the Ninja Club, so yeah, you can know that I was there already for my nin-nins just this time around. Frankly, I'm surprised it took them that long to actually do one with the Ninja Club. I mean, it's not like I've been waiting a long time for this or anything. I mean, it's not at all. But yeah, frankly, that was quite a little bit more exciting for me, mostly just because I actually really like the characters that were involved in this one. I mean, the previous year, it's not like they didn't have anything. They did the whole thing at Kyoto instead, and the whole thing at Kyoto itself was also pretty fun, so I don't really have issues with that. Although it feels like them announcing all of these real-life events very last minute, I can't imagine it being really good for sales, because with in-game stuff, I can kind of get it, because with in-game content, you kind of want to keep the information for as long as possible so people can't figure out too quickly how strong the character will be and all of that before making their purchase. Right, it's part of the sales tactic, but with goods like this, to begin with, it's like you can't expect to announce this and then people in like fucking like Greece or the US or something are gonna look at the pop-up store announcement and be like, ah yes, that's starting in 5 days. You can bet I'm gonna be down there soon. I'm just gonna go get my tickets now. Like, I don't think it works that way. So like overall, it just feels like it isn't as good as a marketing proposition to actually sell goods on such a short span. But that said, in celebration of that, I'm gonna go get the thing. So like, nin. Yeah, I actually got the funny shirt for the Funny Raccoons YouTube channel, so now I too can rap Ojou-sama Ninja. The pop-up store itself, this time around, I actually did get in on the first few days. Like, after 2 years of actually messing it up and not getting in early, this time around, I actually did properly ballot for it. To be honest, with this pop-up store, I was a little worried at first because I was actually on a business trip till the day before, and I was actually worried if I could make it back on time, or rather, I would actually miss day one itself, because day one was Saturday, and I was basically stuck in Osaka on a business trip till Saturday, so I had to book it on Sunday instead. So there's part of me that's really worried that they would actually run out of some of the goods, but it would seem that after 2 years of fucking up, they have finally gotten a lot better at managing the logistics, because it does feel like with most of these events, they do keep it extremely well stocked. I think I mentioned the same thing with the Animate one last year, although the Atre collab last year was still a little fucky-wucky with the amount of goods they had stocked, so going after the initial days where you actually had to ballot for space wasn't really possible. But yeah, at least this time around, I did manage to properly ballot for it, so I did get to go in and get all the stuff that I wanted. I actually went back a lot later to help someone else get their stuff as well on a completely separate day, about a week or so later, and even then most of the stuff was still in stock, in spite of the fact that the ballot actually basically had the place running a queue that was never ending for the first 5 days as well. So suffice to say, it does feel like they stocked it a lot better than they did in the past few years. For those who are wondering, this time around was also a Valentine's theme thing. Every single year they've been basically running it just in time for Valentine's itself, where they basically gave out like mini chocolates as well as some goods that are basically chocolate themed, along with all the other stuff for the pop-up store. Kind of like this, where they actually had a actual edible chocolate that came with the postcard itself. Frankly, I think this might actually be expired since this was from last year. Can chocolates actually expire? Like, I don't know if it actually states it. December 2024. I mean, there's a part of me that wants to open this to give it a try, but I feel like I don't really want to turn into a zombie and like cause a biohazard meltdown in Japan anytime soon, so we're gonna keep that aside for now. This year, instead of a real chocolate, they basically sold the chocolate themed like acrylic keychains and the like instead, where they basically had the in-game Valentine chocolates like just tagged together with the character themselves, which I feel like something like this is a lot easier to carry around, and the fact that it is printed the way it is makes me feel a little more safe about the fact that it won't get damaged, since the printing's on the front instead of the back. Frankly, I prefer if the printing was in the middle of the acrylic, but it would seem that's just too much to be asking for companies nowadays. It's a little big, so it ends up covering the fingers a little, but we can leave it there like this till maybe the end of this video. Then maybe for the next video I'll change it back to show everything else instead. Either way, there was a lot of nin goods there for the your ninjutsu club, and as someone who reps their autism ninja fam, I'm not gonna put this parka on because it's too hot, but We eating good this year, boys. Looking at myself in the camera while doing that, it just feels so awkward, if anything, especially since there's no one else in this house. But yeah, aside from that, there was also the Animate collab pop-up store that happened later in the same month. This one was based off the Pandemonium Society instead, so it's the bunch of other autism girls in the series. With that one, as per usual with the Animate ones, I feel like they tend to be a little more extravagantly decorated, where they did have the same or similar-ish thing to the last 2 years, where you basically had it themed and you had like mini cutscenes framed up within the theme of the event or the pop-up store itself, where all of them were basically dressed for the part, and you basically had like in the pop-up store itself like messaging app for the Momo Talks for the game itself, where the different characters were talking to each other and to you as well. And there were a few of these as well as all the goods on display. Like with the last few years, I feel like with the Animate ones, it tends to be fairly stable in the sense that you kind of know what to expect, and it's kind of nice that they still like put this level of effort into all of the stuff that they do for the collab with Animate for those pop-up stores. Also, they had some of the previous goods as well back on sale this time around, which I guess there was some of it that probably didn't manage to sell out, since it does feel like with the Animate ones, they do tend to stock pretty well. I feel like even from the very first year that they started doing this, it's like it was just completely stocked to the point where they had a lot of good restrictions to prevent people from overbuying. But in spite of the fact that people would flood in the first few days, they basically kept enough of the goods in stock such that even up until the very last days, there was nothing that had sold out, which in a way it feels like logistics wise you're kind of gonna lose money doing that, but maybe they have a plan for it, because I do know that some of their goods sometimes gets like sold to some of the other stores who would then resell it as well. So I guess since this is not meant to be a limited good sale but just something that is on sale starting from this period, it was just something that they actually just had very readily available, so that was kind of nice to be able to just go and get whatever I wanted. That said though, with the Animate one overall, I feel like the goods just feel a little more generic at this point, I guess is the way I'll put it. Like there is enough goods out there now because of all of the merchandise pushes that they have done over time. It feels like with a lot of the stuff there, it's just like, yeah, you kind of did something very similar with the camp badges and the like last year and the year before as well. So there wasn't really all too much that was very new. It was just like some parkas that were fairly normal, kind of like even with the Ninjutsu Club one, it just felt fairly normal-ish. The good thing with that one is just that it's not full print of an anime character, so I can still wear that around outside. But overall, the stuff was nice. Like especially if you love the characters, I feel like it would be really good to have, just because like especially for characters like Makoto or Ibuki, there isn't as much stuff out there, so it probably would be really cool to get your hands on it just for like to rep the mini autism or the big autism fan club instead. But it just doesn't have the same level of vibe as something like the Atre one, where they kind of had like the little wooden sake glass, I guess not glass, but like the thing that you would have that you put the sake cup into, and then that you would actually basically drink your alcohol out of as well for the hyakiyako. I don't know how many of the characters in it are even old enough to drink, but it does fit the whole Japanese theme of it very well. I don't know if I'll actually attempt to drink alcohol out of this. I feel like the sawdust might give me melamine poisoning or something, so this is just gonna stay in the back. But yeah, overall for the Animate one as well, it just really did feel like seeing all of the goods lined up in a glass case. It felt very extravagant still, even though I complain a little and say that it feels a little generic. When you see all of it together there like that, it still feels very nice, especially if you're someone who likes the series. And that combined with the usual thing that they have on the walls with the timeline showing like all of the events that have happened within the year, as well as all of the mini scenes through the use of the Momo Talk instead for all of the different like character interactions that they basically tried to build into creating an overall cohesive pop-up store experience, if that makes any sense, makes it feel a lot more grand than many of the like other pop-up stores that I have gone to, even for the ones within Animate itself, just because you actually feel like you're following like a small scene within the lives of these characters as well, rather than it just being a goods push on its own. For those who are wondering, both of the pop-up stores did have like collectible randomized postcards as well. As per the drill with most of these pop-up stores within Japan, while it is the case that the postcards themselves are actually randomized, they're only randomized if you spend below a certain amount, because of the fact that they basically have all of them arranged as a full set, and whenever you purchase something, they'll pull all of them out in order, so it isn't actually truly randomized. If you purchase or you spend enough, they just give you essentially a full set. So it's not that difficult, thankfully, because I know the Animate Cafe, they refuse to give you the collectible goods until the food arrives. And so as a result, because of the fact that it's when it arrives, if there are multiple people in the cafe, it actually becomes random, so it can be very difficult to try to get everything. But I like how with the Animate stores and most pop-up stores in general, they tend to be a bit more friendly and they actually have it non-randomized and easily obtainable instead. Yeah, for the Animate one, they actually had quite a few since they had both the original art as well as the art for the pop-up store design in the set instead, bringing it to a total of 11, I believe. Whereas with the one for the Atre, because of the fact that there were much fewer characters, and they didn't actually try to push all the different art variations to this level, you really didn't have to struggle as hard to get all the different designs. However, with the Atre one, they didn't actually have a postcard. Instead, they had 2 different campaigns going on, where you got a very small like mini sticker for purchasing from the pop-up store itself that kind of basically look like this. As you can see, they are really tiny as stickers, some of which just have the character's name and some of the character designs, and it basically goes through all of the characters that were involved in it, including the Hyaka Ryoran as well, or Kikyo and the rest. So overall, these were really difficult to figure out how best to display because of how tiny they were. I feel like maybe I need to find something to stick them all on and then I can display them as a card. But aside from this, they also had a collectible card set, kind of like with last year. With this one, I kind of already put it into the binder because of the fact that it was a lot further back and it's a card binder instead, so it fits a lot better. But as you can see, there are all 8 variations in here, 1 for each of the characters and 2 for each of them as a group shot, I guess. One other thing that was really cool with the Atre one was also the fact that they were actually playing like the mini cutscene things that they have been doing the last few years as well, where basically they have the seiyus voicing the characters themselves and they're basically just talking to each other about basically going through Atre itself, or like just shopping in a mall and all of that. So a little small thing that was kind of very cute. I kind of like how like with both Atre as well as the Animate ones, they actually go the extra mile and have all of this depending on the IP itself, whether or not they want to do it. I'm just kind of grateful that they actually did do it, since it's just kind of cute just seeing the cute girl doing cute things going on and just being played as a little voice drama that was actually audible throughout the entirety of the mall itself as you're just walking through it. It really adds to the vibes of the pop-up itself, even when you're just walking through the other parts of the mall. That said, lastly, I did also go to Wonderfes again this year. This time around, I went in a bit of a different form, I guess, since this time around, by some connections within the company I work in, I actually managed to attend as a guest instead of a regular participant, so not too much of a difference. The only difference is that I go to a different place to collect my ticket, but it's not like I can get in early or anything, since you have a specific timing that is stated on the ticket and you can only enter at that timing, since we are not actually a participant in the sense of a booth personnel, but just a standard guest and not a regular participant. This time around it was pretty fun as well, although I was hearing a lot of talk about some drama going on behind the scenes due to the poor logistics, if anything, where people were complaining about the fact that the organizing committee was actually trying to prevent people from selling all of their model kits as well as all of the goods that they were bringing into the event to anyone else who was a booth or corporate participant there during the event. And because of that, some of the people who were basically running some of these booths as well, it kind of annoyed them to the point where they were actually considering halting all sales altogether until the people or they themselves and the other booth personnel were also able to purchase. So instead of actually at 11:30 when people start to enter, you start to sell to everyone, they were gonna plan to just like halt all of this until 12. There was also a lot of issues with the logistics when it came to the wristbands that people were using to prove that they had actually purchased a ticket, since you basically needed the wristband to be able to enter and walk around inside. And what happened was that, from what I heard, for the regular attendees, they actually kind of messed up the quality of the wristband so badly that and some people actually lost their tickets like that and were actually sent out of the hall to get a new one or sent to the back of the line again to actually verify like what happened to their ticket. So there was a lot of things that were going on that apparently went pretty badly, and eventually the organizing committee itself actually had to apologize for all of that had happened. As someone who actually entered as a guest instead, I guess I was actually kind of safe from all of this instead, because for some reason we actually got a completely different, fairly standard wristband, because like while we also didn't get a wristband that was the standard one where you just like remove the adhesive and just like wrap it around and stick it there, ours was made of a bit more of a waterproof material. It wasn't just standard paper, so it didn't just fall off and tear due to the moisture or anything like that. So in a way, as someone who wanted to go there and and just mostly chill and just browse. It ended up being fairly fortunate since I was actually like immune to most of the disasters that were happening during the event, it seems. But yeah, suffice to say, a lot happened during the logistics of the event that seems to not have gone very well for them. Hopefully this also means that we won't be seeing all of this happen again next year if they learn from all of the mistakes that happened this time around. That said, when it comes to Wonderfes, as with the last time I made a video on it, which was a little while back, it was still quite as enjoyable. There was still many new figures there to see, both in terms of the official ones as well as the garage kits that people were making. Unfortunately, I didn't really buy anything this time because I was there with someone else and we were just mostly browsing and looking at all the figures that were on display. I think one of the funniest things I saw was the fact that someone made a model kit of runs, and for some reason that actually managed to sell out. Like, it was the funniest thing ever, because like, even when I think of the series, right, like runs, I don't think of people actually liking the main character himself enough to want a figure of the main character, let alone enough people wanting it for it to sell out. So that was funnily bizarre, I guess. But aside from that, there were still many other interesting figures to see during the event as well. The garage kits that people were selling, frankly, it always amazes me the quality that the people who are there not as corporations but just as hobbyists are able to reach with their creation of their own kits as well. And frankly, it's always so tempting to want to purchase it as expensive as they are. Like, some of these, they're actually on the level of something that maybe like Atre or some of the more expensive other figure brands out there actually produce, although it tends to be a lot more that you're getting in terms of just the sheer scale of the figure than it feels like most official corporations actually give. Granted, maybe in terms of quality, it may not be there on the same level, but it's kind of cool to see that in terms of the scale of the figures that they're making, it can actually compete with some of the bigger firms out there as well. Meanwhile, when it comes to the big companies, there was also a lot of hype going around with the figures coming out from there, especially with all of the different new figures that actually get announced at these events. In a way, I'm not sure, it could just be me imagining it, but I feel like this time around there was a lot more of that, and there were a lot more hype around a lot of it, since there were figures from some of the other series that I don't really follow that people seem to be really hyped about as well. Like, I think there was even one for Arcane, which is the League of Legends thing, which was being produced by, I think, was it Good Smile or something? Or KD Cole? Like, there was a lot of very interesting figures coming out for series that just never had any before, and on a more global scale in that sense. And one thing that I saw there that actually kind of both amazed me and terrified me a little as well were all of the figures from the Chinese companies that were being put on display as well. Like, one thing I realized with this year's Wonderfest more so than the previous years was that there was actually a bit of an increase in the number of figures up by all of the Chinese companies out there that have basically also had started to have their own little booths within Wonderfest itself, as well as official corporations. And the level of quality, I would say, in terms of sheer quality, the figures aren't there yet, right? They are a lot cheaper for sure, and as a result, you're getting a lot more like material for the price that you're paying. I saw some of the very big ones with their like little background set pieces and all of that, and those actually were still fairly affordable. I think like some of them were maybe only like 10,000 to maybe 20,000, the low 20,000s there about yen, which, thinking about it, like, you get something that looks like that for the price that it is, yeah, you're basically getting something that is a lot more affordable than like a KD Cole or something. So it was kind of terrifying in a way to see how much they were, or like how competitively they were able to price a lot of these pretty grand looking figures. Feels like they have chosen to refine it to be more competitive in a price point, but in terms of quality, maybe one day. But for now, while it looks cool, you can still see, especially if you go very close to it, how rough around the edges it is. Like, sometimes there's just a little bit of excess material dripping off here and there. The paint is a little iffy here and there, even for a display one, which you would think would be a, as far as possible, high quality display so that they can show that the quality is good so that people would be impressed with it. But who knows, maybe given a few more years, they might actually make something that's even competitive in terms of quality, so I shouldn't diss it all too much. Either way, it was kind of impressive seeing the stuff that these companies were also producing and displaying at these events. But yeah, that said, overall, I just found it to be really fun just walking through Wonderfest overall. It's one of those events where, if not for the fact that I would have to paint the garage kits myself, I feel like I would be more tempted to purchase stuff at the events, and some of the figures do look really cool. And I just feel like, with how clumsy I usually am and how bad I am with like finicking small things overall, that I might accidentally break something or I might fuck up the paint job, and then I'll feel really bad about it, and then I'll just go on this spiral that will cause me to sink into like a little bit of a sad like depression arc or something. So I didn't really want to buy too many of those. I still have the Koharu one from last year that I still have not actually painted yet. I still need to find a good chance to paint explain that. So maybe this year we'll finally find a good opportunity and I'll do like a stream of me painting it or something if people are actually interested in that. But yeah, for the most part, it was just a lot of walking through and looking at the figures and seeing what else had been announced but was not yet up on display. So overall, it gives a good sense of what the figures look like for those who are excited for it and who are really interested in that and who want to figure out firsthand what it looks like and therefore whether or not they want to purchase it. I feel like it's a good way to go down and give it all a good look beforehand, although spending the money to go down to an event just to look at the figure to figure out if you want to purchase it might be not very economically sensible. But seeing all the figures before they come out, as well as the announcements of new figures that had not even had a display figure set up yet for this event, was indeed pretty interesting. But yeah, that's all for me for today. Thank you all for watching. I think that covers about most of the other stuff that there is. I feel like especially with winter specifically, because of the fact that some of the bigger things I'm already taking them out and isolating them for their own videos, it ends up being the case that for this specific video there isn't as much to talk about. But nonetheless, I hope it was interesting, since for me at least some of the pop-up stores were still something that, especially the ones that I talked about in this video, was something that I find to be really interesting purely because of the skill as well as the style at which they're being done, which makes them feel different from the way that most pop-up stores are typically being done, especially the ones in like say Gamers in Akihabara for example, which I take the pictures of. With those, it really is just that one stand and the goods and then that's it. So it's cool to see, but it isn't on the scale of the ones like the Nanoha one or the Blue Archive ones where it's like you have full-on displays and it's like a little mini exhibition area. For the Nanoha one, they actually even charged for the viewing of the exhibition area separately from entering the store because that was the scale of the exhibition that they had prepared to display stuff for it. So to me, stuff like that, as well as the smaller pop-up stores that are specifically to celebrate or to let individual creators whose works got big sell their goods as well. Like I find those to be really interesting as well, because with many of these creators, they do start out initially in the doujin space, and it's kind of interesting to see their growth to the point where the IP itself can be big enough for them to basically be able to work with a massive store within Akihabara to have their own pop-up store for their series like that. So always a cool thing to see for me, so I wanted to share all of that with you guys. Aside from also the fact that Wonderfes was still as large as before, it seems like they pulled a fucky walkie, but hopefully they learn from the mistake and the next one won't be as bad. But that's it. That's all for me for today. And thank you to the very cool people whose names are over here for helping to support the channel as usual. Love you all and thank you all for helping to make it easier for me to basically take a little bit of a step back from work to produce all of these videos as well as to afford some of the stuff that's needed to get all of the videos done. Maybe not so much this one, but for the other ones where there are actually more like props as well as things involved in the editing and all. But that's it. I'll be heading off for now. I seem to be mispronouncing words a lot today. I have no idea why that's happening. But until next time, take care and then bye-bye.